to go over your literary term list, and there's quite a few terms on the list. The first word on the list is the word plot, and plot is defined as the series of events that occur in a story or a play. The second word on your list is exposition, and it's one of four forms of discourse which something is explained or set forth. The third word on your literary term list is conflict. All stories have to have a conflict, and it's defined as the struggle between opposing forces. This could be man versus man, or man versus himself, or even man versus society, or man versus nature. Climax is the next word on the list, and it's the point in the plot that creates the greatest point of tension. Resolution, this is a term that means the conclusion of the story. It's how the story ends up. It doesn't necessarily have to be a happy ending. Some stories end in tragedy. The flashback, that's a word that means a scene that interrupts the formal chronological sequence of events in a story. It goes back to a previous time. Foreshadowing is another term on your list, and it means clues or hints to what's going to happen later in the story. Situational irony is the next word on your list, and this is the kind of irony where you expect one thing to happen in the story, but something else indeed happens. So, for example, think about the story that you read as freshman called The Necklace by Guy Maupassant. And it was a story where a woman borrowed a necklace and thought it was worth thousands of dollars. She lost it and paid it back, yet found out that the necklace was a fake all along. So quite a twist at the end. The next word on your list is verbal irony, and this is another type of irony, except this is the kind that's spoken and not just a situation. This is where one thing is said but a different meaning is meant. Let's see, dramatic irony is the next one on your list, a type of irony where the audience is privy to some information that one of the characters does not know. For example, in The Cask of Amontillado that you read as freshman, Montresor, the main character in the story, tells his audience that he plans on killing Fortunato. However, Fortunato doesn't know this, and he is taken for a fool. The protagonist in the story is the central or the main character of the story or play, and the antagonist, by contrast, is the person or force that opposes the protagonist in a story. On the back side of your literary term list, you have dynamic characterization, and this is the type of characterization where one person changes in the play or the story. A static characterization is where the person does not change at all, stays the same. That's what static means, remains the same. Round character, this is the type of character that has a complex dimension. And then by contrast, we have the flat character. The flat character, of course, is a character that has only one or two character traits and is not very well rounded at all. No complex dimension for this character at all. Then we also have the word stereotype, another literary term, which basically means a fixed idea or conception about a group of people, and it's often based on race, religion, or gender. And so sometimes we'll have this type of character in a story, such as the nerdy smart kid or the dumb jock or something like that. And so these are often used as stock characters in a story. We also have motivation. Motivation is a term that basically means the reason behind why a character behaves the way he or she does. We have setting as another literary term. Setting means when or where the story takes place. And so when we begin to read the events of the Puritans, we'll notice that most of the events occur in the New England area back in the 1600s. They lived in a very barren wilderness type of environment with just little log cabin types of places to live, and so the settings are very sparse. The social context. This is the cultural context of a story, the historical aspects of a story related to the setting. So not only just when and where it takes place, but also the social aspects of the day. For example, during the time of the Puritans, they didn't have television sets, and they, of course, had the Bible, and not very much to do except just work and go to church and read the Bible. So that was the kind of environment they lived in those days. Then we have the tone of a story. The tone of a story is the attitude in which the writer takes regarding a subject, and so sometimes the writer is sarcastic about a topic, and sometimes the writer seems to be rooting for a certain topic that comes up In Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, it seems that the narrator is rooting for Hester Prynne, the protagonist in the story. Then we have narrator. This is, of course, the person telling the story. And we also have the word speaker. Sometimes the speaker and the narrator are different. A speaker can be, just the voice in, for example, a poem. And sometimes it's taken from a different vantage point. For example, Emily Dickinson oftentimes would disguise her voice and become the voice of an animal, such as a snake or a bird or something like that. And so the speaker doesn't necessarily have to be the narrator. Also, we have point of view, and this is the angle in which the story is told. And there's different kinds of point of view. The first one on your list is the first person point of view, and this is where the main character or one of the main characters is telling his or her own story, just from his perspective or her perspective. And we also have what's called third person limited point of view, and this is a very common point of view used in modern storytelling, where you just have an unknown narrator just focusing on one particular person or aspect of the story and doesn't have knowledge of all of the characters. There's this omniscient point of view character that's more godlike, this all-knowing narrator that can tell you everything, and this typically sounds more like a fairy tale type of story with that type of narration. And then we also have theme. This word on your list basically means the insight about human life that's revealed through a piece of literary work. And then we also have symbol, which is a person, place, or thing or event that has meaning in itself, but then it also has meaning outside of itself. For example, the flag has its own meaning. It's a piece of cloth with certain colors and symbols on it, but then it also has meanings to people very special, like meanings of bravery, heroism, and those kinds of things, and freedom. Also, we have the word allusion. Allusion is a word on your literary term list meaning a reference to someone or something that's known from history or religion or politics or art or something like that. And so it's just a reference that's made to something outside of the story or the scope of the story. For example, in the Puritan stories, oftentimes they're telling their story, but at the same time they make allusions or references back to biblical characters. We also have the word parody on the list, and parody is basically defined as a work that makes fun of another work by imitating some aspect of the writer's style. And so if you think about Saturday Night Live, sometimes we have skits on there that we see by the comedians where they're doing a parody of some person's song or a politician or something like that. Weird Al Yankovic was a person who would do parodies of famous musicians. For example, he did a song called Eat It, which was a parody to Michael Jackson's song Beat It. He also did Amish Paradise, which was a parody of Gangster Paradise back in the 1990s. And so parody can use humor to draw in an audience. And then we also have satire, which is closely linked to parody. Satire is a type of writing that ridicules, makes fun of the shortcomings of people or institutions or society in some way. But it also goes a step further because it tries to attempt to bring about some kind of change. And so in today's times, we have Jon Stewart, who does a lot of satire. Saturday Night Live is a great example. Stephen Colbert and his Colbert Report is an excellent example of political satire. And then the piece that we're going to look at in your text with the Puritans, we're going to look at William Byrd. And he was not a Puritan himself. He lived in Virginia several decades after the Puritans, but he found them to be very humorous people and very hypocritical in a lot of ways. And so he wrote a piece kind of making fun of their shortcomings. And so we'll take a look at that. It's called History of the Dividing Line. So those are your literary terms for this list, and you'll need to make sure you study them and know them because they will end up on the unit test as well as the final exam. So make sure you know these terms.